Okay, we are now live on YouTube.
Sure. So we're back in public session. Thank you, everybody. Sorry we were a little late. Just for my board members, if you can please just mute yourselves.
That's me. I realized because I have the YouTube up, so I need to.
Mute your browser.
Please
Yes.
just mute yourselves.
That's me. I realized because I have the YouTube up, so I need to.
Mute your browser.
Thank you. Yes.
Mute yourself.
Okay, we're good now. I muted the browser with the YouTube, so now it's just the Zoom. Thank
Okay,
you.
Good.
Sorry about that.
All right. The next portion of our agenda is board correspondence. We did get some board correspondence from a parent concerning communication about extracurricular or the co-curriculars that was responded to by our education committee chair and a couple board members. So thank you for doing that. And it's also my understanding administration has been in contact with that parent. Public hearing on bond refunding. Mr. Stiles?
Yeah, I don't, is there anyone else that is in a waiting room?
No, they're only, so for anyone watching via YouTube, you will only be let into the Zoom meeting for public comment. Everyone else is viewing the meeting via YouTube.
Okay, because yeah, I thought we were going to have, never mind.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, who's the name of the person you're waiting for, Tim?
Rabia Kapoor.
Yes.
She's here. Okay, so I will introduce from the Phoenix Advisors, Rabia Kapoor. She's our financial advisor, or one of them, and she will go through the details or some, probably the broad overview of the bond refunding that we talked about at our last meeting. It is a significant savings to the board. It's literally, to me, I always look at it as like refinancing your mortgage, but with us, it's our bonds. So with that, I'll introduce, if she's here, Rabia Kapoor. There she is, and you're on mute. Thank you, Rabia.
Hi, everybody. We are here tonight to discuss the authorization to refinance, as Tim mentioned, just like refinancing your mortgage, the district's 3 series of bonds, the 2011, 2012, and 2013. They all have call dates. When the bonds are sold, they are sold with a call date, so the investors know they're going to get their money until at least the call date. The 2011s are callable in January 2021. The next one is 2022, and the 2013s are not until 2024. We wanted to authorize the refinancing of all 3. However, only 2 of them are viable at this time. The state requires that you can refinance, that you should refinance if you can get 3% present value savings on your bond. So when we combine the 2011s and the 12s, we're going to issue about $16 million in bonds. The savings are going to be about $1.1 million. So we're way in excess of the 3% required. We're at about 8% present value on the 11 bonds and almost 7% on the 2012 bonds. The rates aren't set until we actually sell the bonds. You had to go through this process of your introduction in September and tonight's adoption and the form and sale adoption. But after tonight, you'll be in the position to sell the bonds. And as soon as we can get everything in order, we will. We had recommended a investment banker, RBC Capital Markets. And they are doing a lot of private placements right now with these bonds, which means it's not a public offering. They're going to go out and talk to some banks and see if they would privately place the bonds. If they do, we're going to save some cost of issuance, about $50,000. We would not have to get a bond rating on the bonds or do an official statement. So there's a couple of options that we're going to do and try to and get you the best deal that we can. There's a lot of appetite out there. Everybody knows rates are very low right now. 20-year bonds are selling at under 2%. The bonds here would only go out until 2027, and they're going to be at maybe 0.9%. So they're extremely low, and we're going to be able to achieve good savings for you. Any questions?
Robbie, just one thing to point out, that you mentioned the savings of $1.1 million.
Mhm.
That goes directly back to the taxpayers, correct?
That's correct. It's on the debt service side of your budget. Now, we have to structure the repayment of the refunding bonds the same way that the original bonds were. We can't push them out any further than they originally were. So I mentioned there's 2 series of bonds. So you're going to get about $200,000 in savings in each of the next 4 years, and then about $100,000 in the 3 years after that. And again, it's on the debt service side of your budget. So that will decrease the debt service side of your budget.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. Tim and Robbie, just take me through why we're adopting for the 3rd series of bonds that doesn't make the 3%.
You know, we things were in a frenzy in July, and rates were so low. They were touching almost 2%. Actually, they were at 2.6% when I talked about these in July. So we thought it was good to authorize the savings because rates were dropping. They kind of hit bottom. It was only about 126,000 at 2.6%. So I think you'll probably be able to refinance them some point. As you get closer to the call date, it's more feasible to refinance them. But again, you're 3 years out.
Okay, but even if we adopt this resolution now authorizing, we're not going to refinance those ones unless there's a 3% savings.
Exactly. Right. But you are in a position to do it whenever you can achieve that 3%.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very
I
much.
think you are required to
Thank you,
open it up to
Robbie.
the public.
You're welcome.
Oh, is that what we have to do?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a public hearing, much like the budget. So if the public
Oh,
has,
so not at public comment right now? Okay.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a separate
you,
public
Tim.
hearing. Mm-hmm.
okay.
So I do have 6 people in the waiting room. If you are in the waiting room and you don't want to comment on this, kindly remove yourself, or I'm just going to call on each of you. However, those of you in the waiting room, you need to make your Zoom name your full name so that I can call on you by your full name. So if you don't remove yourself, I will call on you and ask you if you have any comments for the public hearing portion of the meeting. So there's only 6 people, so that won't take that long.
Right, and this is purely about the bond refunding. If they have a question, they have a public comment on the bond refunding. That's it. That's what this is for. Okay, just this portion of it. Okay.
All right, thank you, Tim.
So, okay, so I will call on each of these people one at a time to see if they have a comment on the bond refunding. So I just included Mr. Parrots. I'm not sure if this part of our meeting is just for public comment on the bond refunding. Did you have anything you wanted to comment with regard to the bond refunding?
He's still connecting to audio, it says.
So
Okay, so that's enough
somebody else
time,
in
I think.
So let me go to somebody
that?
else in the waiting. I'm going to connect somebody else. They're all having.
Could the problem be on our end with the audio?
It shouldn't be because you're all connected just fine.
And you were able to let Ms. Porter-
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, let me try one more person.
Yeah, we're not doing too good here on this one.
So people are listening to the YouTube,
Mhm.
and they put themselves in the waiting room early, potentially, and maybe they're not at their computers. So you're letting them in.
That
You
is
don't-
very possible. Yes, that is very possible. Maybe they weren't expecting to be let in until.
Until the first opportunity for public comment.
That is, okay, so I'm gonna go, that is very, very possible. All right. So I'm just going to remove them. Yes, because they were all in before that, so way before that. So that is very possible.
So it appears we don't have anybody who wants to comment on the public hearing and bond refunding. The public hearing of the bond refunding.
Correct. You know what? Okay, there's two other people that only have first names, so I will admit them and see if they're there.
Okay.
But again, they may not be by their computer.
Or they might be in the YouTube, like, I don't know. Exactly what
That last
what
person.
device you're using for YouTube versus maybe what you're using for Zoom.
Yeah, actually, if Robbie got in, then there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it
I
couldn't. So
think.
Miss Smith, are you with us? So she's connected, but I don't know if anyone's there. Okay. So these
Okay.
folks can rejoin us.
All right. We'll try again when we get to first opportunity of public comment. All right. Technology. And no, none of the board members have any other questions, right? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
You
Right?
might want to just close the pub.
Yeah, I think you have to make a motion
Okay.
to close the public portion.
Rita.
and then you can adopt whenever.
Rita,
Can I,
so move to close the public hearing on the bond refunding.
Second.
all right, and just all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
All right.
So that brings you to my comments and reports. So one of the items that I'm required to report, and this is not something we've reported in the past, but it's something that the DOE has asked us to report now moving forward. So it just has to do with our graduation rate and then the pathways via which our class of 2020 graduated, and that is in regard to the testing requirement. You know, there's the PARCC/NJSLA testing requirement, but there's also alternative ways to meet that testing requirement. So I'm just going to go through the data, and this data will be in the minutes so that you can read this as well. So 466 students graduated in our class of 2020, and that represented 97.1% of our 12th grade students last year. The remaining 2.9% was comprised of 10 students. And the reason that they did not graduate with last year's class, there were several reasons. 7 are students in our special education program who are returning for additional years of schooling. 2 are returning to complete additional credits and will be part of our 5-year graduation rate. And 1 withdrew to complete their GED. Now, with regard to how they graduated in terms of what testing requirement they met, and it's broken down by meeting the math testing requirement, how they met the math testing requirement, and how they met the ELA testing requirement. So with regard to the math testing requirement, 340 students met the graduation assessment requirement for math by passing either the PARCC or the NJSLA. The reason I say one or the other is in their earlier years of schooling, it was called PARCC. And then in their later years, it was the NJSLA. So they passed one or the other. 110 passed one of the substitute competency tests, such as they achieved the required score on the PSAT, SAT, ACT. 1 student completed the portfolio appeal process, and 15 students met alternative requirements for the math assessment portion as per their IEP. With regards to the English language arts testing requirement, 348 students met that graduation assessment requirement by passing the PARCC or NJSLA for ELA. 89 passed a substitute competency test, 4 completed the portfolio appeal process, and 25 met alternate requirements as per their IEP. And as I'm finishing that, I just realized that Robbie was still with us and we can probably let her go, right?
Yes, that's what I was
I know,
going
I'm
to
sure
text
you're
you to
so
say.
interested in that.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but okay. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Robbie.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Robbie.
You're welcome.
With regard to just a couple other items, we've had 2 meetings thus far of the Mascot Exploration Committee, and we will be sending out an invitation for additional members of the community who want to attend an open forum to share their feedback and input with the board and administration as we are on our path to make a decision regarding our current mascot and logo. So that we will be, once we determine a date for that, we will send that out, and that will be advertised as a board meeting because the intent is for the board members to be there to listen to the comments that are made. We also have been, our strategic plan design team has been meeting to work on the foundational pieces of the strategic plan. And I think Bob will speak a little bit more about that during his Ed Committee report in terms of what our plan is for sharing some of those, the draft goals with the board, because that will be part of our November 10th board presentation. And so for the strategic plan committee, I'll be reaching out to you in the next week or so to give you an update just so that we can talk about the process moving forward. So Jordana, you'll be getting an email from me about that. And then just an update on some things that have been happening. You know, we certainly know that this is not a normal year, but we are still trying to hold the events that we would be holding, the informational events for our parents and students, specifically that we generally hold in the fall. So our junior night for students and parents is this Thursday night. That will be a virtual event. Our freshmen, and actually we're having the PSATs tomorrow. So all of our 10th and 11th graders are invited into school tomorrow to take the PSAT test, and our 9th and 12th graders will have an entirely virtual day. And that will be an asynchronous instructional day because we do need all of our staff to proctor the PSATs during the school day. But during the morning, I believe it's at 8 a.m., an email went today to all of the freshmen and their parents that there's actually a virtual session for the freshmen with their guidance counselors tomorrow so that they can start exploring our Naviance career and college program and looking at some of that software. So we are moving ahead with a lot of those programs virtually. And we've had great participation in the parent and student nights that we've done so far. So I really commend our staff for creatively implementing these programs for our students and their parents. And that is all I have.
Liz, can I just ask a quick question on graduation requirements?
Yes.
Do we know what's going to happen this year yet, or is it sort of up in the air?
No, we do not.
Okay.
They have not announced yet. They have not announced they said they will be announcing a testing calendar for the spring, but that's what they say every year. So we're waiting to find out about that. And I do not believe that when I say we don't know, we have done an audit, for lack of a better term, of our seniors in terms of who has already met a testing requirement and who needs to meet an alternate testing requirement. So I do actually believe it's different for every class of students. Right. So I don't want to speak out of turn. So I believe right now it's just it's still the same process in place of the alternate testing of the alternate pathways. And if I get different information, I will let you know, but I believe that is the case for this year as well. What we don't know is if there's actually going to be an NJSLA administered in the spring.
Right. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, so board committee reports, education, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, President Barone. So the Education Committee met last week on October the 7th We had a very full agenda for that day, so I'm just going to kind of plow through here. First, we heard from Mr. Librera, who gave us an update on the events that have been taking place since the beginning of schools, talking about some of the things that Liz just ran through, the session for parents for college prep, the ACT that we ran for our students, just for the Watchung Hills students, the SATs that we did for the region, where we had about 100 of our students participate, the virtual back to school night, the arranging for book delivery for our virtual students, the fact that our athletic teams are now in their fifth week of being back together, but the second week of active sports competitions, with noting that the football team had their first game last night and were victorious. The PSAT, as Liz mentioned, is tomorrow. We've got junior back to school night. They've got student picture day prepared. But there was a lot of talk on, what was working in the hybrid model, what things they would want to look at, maybe adjust, now that we are coming to the midway point in marking period one. One of the things that they're focusing on is how to increase engagement and how to increase collaboration. So now that we're kind of a month in and everyone's starting to get their sea legs about them, what are the things that we may need to tweak to further increase student engagement? And what do we need to tweak to further increase collaboration with our teachers? Bill also noted that weather is going to be a factor because there have been certain things that we've been able to do outside that as things get cooler, they may need to find new ways to provision those particular activities. You may notice that the tents have been removed from the premises. The students actually wanted to be more in the sun, so the tents were removed so they could have more sun. And that when we've had poor weather where you could utilize the tents, it hasn't been that warm outside anyway. Fortunately, in the past couple of weeks, we haven't really had that much rain until the past couple of days, but that certainly has been helpful. But they have then created two new snack areas, one for snack and one for relaxation. Gym 5 and 6 is for snack. Gym 1 and 2 is more for relaxation during that breaks where students had normally been going out to the tents as things get cooler. And then in addition to that, they talked about this new system to use a phone entrance pass for students, meaning that the information that they're required to provide, every day regarding the COVID survey, that could actually be done by phone to assist in students' arrival into the school, knowing that those things have been completed. Mr. Sabino then talked to us a little bit about tiered services. And that there are, how do we further support our students that may need additional support, and the process that they've put in place to begin to identify students that may need of additional assistance, being able to not only identify them, but then put the supports structures in place. So they're in the process of developing that watch list for students. Ms. Phelan provided us an update on the type of assessments that the teachers are using in the classroom right now, and how our supervisors are working with them. Really, they've met with all of the supervisors and they're using department meetings to get an update on how teachers are assessing students, looking to find more open-ended assessments, utilizing things like Flipgrid and OneNote or Microsoft Teams. And the math department is using things like exit tickets to measure engagement, looking more at how students are approaching problems, not whether or not they got the right solution, but what the process is that they're involved with. They're also exploring how do we assess the students that are 100% virtual right now versus assessing the students that are in class. And he also reminded us that she reminded us that our supervisors have actually started doing their observations. We then spent time talking about the Co-Curricular Advisors. I'm pleased to report that there's another batch of co-curricular advisors and activities up for approval this evening. We continue to work to get all of the clubs and advisors in place. But as we mentioned at the last meeting, some of them we need more information. Some of them we don't have advisors for yet. And as soon as those can be addressed, it remains a priority for this board to ensure that we get all of the activities up and running as quickly as possible in a way that adheres to the health and safety guidelines that we are following. In addition to that, we had a discussion on the new and revised course curriculum approvals on the agenda tonight. There is a preview item for the new courses, and you all will have a link to be able to go in and between now and the next board meeting when we will approve them, go in and take a look go through the new courses or the revised courses, see if you have any questions and address those questions to the administration so that we can have those answered before we have a discussion and vote on the new or revised course curriculum at the next board meeting. We also discussed the Wood Arts Child Development. We're having difficulty filling those positions, both in Wood Arts and Child Development. The current teachers are retiring from those positions mid-year, and they've been posted, but in the event that we're not able to fill those positions, the administration may have to take a different approach or look at reimagining those positions. They're looking at some options, and they'll provide further updates for us in the future. We spent a little bit of time talking about our normal report from the administration to the board on the student performance reports and student performance data. That presentation is scheduled for the 10th. What's interesting is that we don't have student performance data from the state to be able to share at that time, but we are still required to hold this presentation. However, there is a lot of information that the administration has to share, including student performance data from the SAT, PSAT, AP, and ACT. And also the opportunity, we talked about using this as an opportunity to look at the draft strategic plan goals. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity to have those draft goals presented. And then at the same time, instead of our supervisors doing a report to us on how they're doing against our old strategic plan goals, just share with us what they're doing to adapt to the hybrid model and what are the innovative ideas that are being brought in the classroom. And so the committee was certainly in favor of that and open to hearing feedback from the board for how that meeting again would be structured. But the idea for the 10th would be we get the data update for the data that is available, have a discussion around the draft strategic plan goals, set a different time for a more in-depth conversation about those goals, but at least get a first blush of where the strategic plan work is, and then hear from our supervisors about the adaptations that they've had to make and what are the great and innovative solutions that they've come up with. Additionally, we talked about diversity, equity, inclusion work and the Watch on Cares. An RFP has gone out to support that work, and the equity team was very involved in the development of that. And we will have more information or more of a discussion of that at our next committee meeting. And then the final item that we had was a discussion on ed reports and looking at both our math curriculum and our math professional development. Ms. Phelan discussed how they were using ed reports, which is a nonprofit foundation that provides services to review instructional materials to make sure that the instructional materials that we're using align to the assessments and the standards that the state has been put in place. So we will have more information about that at a future meeting, but Ms. Phelan was very positive about the work with ed reports, and that Dan Twizzler and Mary Ellen are both were highly impressed by the information shared with them. The last item that I'll share with you, it wasn't actually, it's ed committee related, but we didn't talk about it because it didn't happen yet. But I did want to report that today the governor signed Executive Order 187, and that executive order allows for the indoor athletic activities and events to commence. Up to this point in time, indoor activities were limited. The focus was on outdoor. But now with the executive order today, the indoor activities, including those that were in the high risk category, will be able to commence under proper mitigation and the attendance, the number of people that may be in a room or participating at one time, following those guidelines that we'll be able to begin planning for the startup of those indoor activities. So no one was really sure when that information was going to come. It came today, so that's good news, so that at least from that aspect of our student activities, we can begin to plan for those seasons as we get new guidance coming in from NJSIAA. So with that, I will stop and turn to any of my colleagues if they have anything to add or any questions from the other board members.
Bob, I'll just add that we actually have a meeting scheduled tomorrow administratively to discuss the guidance that just came out about winter sports. So the board can expect at upcoming personnel and education committee meetings, we'll share with you our recommendation and tentative plan for moving forward so that the board can then discuss that and take action.
Bob said activities and you're saying sports is.
It's athletics and activities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I just wanted to be clear.
And I see Peter and Greg have their
Peter?
hands. Can you see that, Bob? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, first, I just want to reiterate a request that I had mentioned to Dr. Jewett before the meeting got started, that I hope we can get the curriculum up that we need to review as board members as early as possible, so we have time when we can fit it into our schedule to look at it. My second question is, Bob, sending out the RFPs, who is it that we were looking to provide proposals for things like the professional development and the other activities in that RFP you sent out?
Liz, go ahead.
Tim, we sent it to ASCD, US2 Consulting, who did the work with us last year and the year prior. And who was the third? I can't remember.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't remember. It was something that we had looked up.
Yes, we looked up different possible providers, and now
Right.
I'll find it in my email to Tim because we
sent out 3, and then two came back.
That's why those are the
Literally today was the day to receive them, and we received 2 from ASCD, and US2 was the name of US2 Consulting is the name of the company.
And I know lots of acronyms. What's ASCD?
So
that's the yeah. Go ahead, Bob.
The Association for Curriculum Development.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, they're a very well-known
National
professional development provider, and US2 is who we've worked with in the past.
Okay, and Bob, my last question, and God, I certainly don't want to suggest that you guys should do anything more because I got exhausted just listening to you.
It was dense. It was a dense meeting.
But I'm curious as to whether you have gotten or you plan to get in the future either reports or feedback on how the hybrid model is working in terms of how our teachers are able to actually communicate both with students in the classroom and with students attending the class virtually, and how that's working, because I'm just having such a hard time getting my head around how that's working.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly one of the things that we talked about, or again, how are the students adapting to it? What are the things that are working? Obviously, one of the concerns was student engagement. So I think wrapped up in student engagement, encapsulates a lot of the things that you just touched on, but also the piece with our teachers. But the other thing that I will just comment on, because we touched on it briefly in at the end of the meeting, and we may talk about it a little bit later here. This is hard. The hybrid model is hard, and our faculty, and I think this is true for teachers across the state or across the country in this model, but certainly is true for our faculty. They're working their tails off. trying to figure this out. They've got kids, that they're watching at home. They've got kids that they're in front of. They're trying to make sure that people are engaged. It's really a very complex and sometimes can feel like a never-ending, challenge to try to get simple things done, and things that would normally take, you would be able to do in a brief amount of time takes much longer to try to get across. So, one of the concerns that I have is, to your point, is, not only how are our teachers doing it, but how are our teachers, in this environment right now, because it's stressful. There's no way around it.
Bob, I have a question.
Hang on, Naresh. I'll get to you. Greg had his hand up, and then Naresh.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for bringing up the governor's announcement today. Just for the public, correct me if I'm wrong, we are still responsible to the NJSIAA, and so until guidance comes out from them, the public, parents, students, athletes should not be expecting an immediate return of those sports, but rather we're going to have to wait to see what guidance we get and just be prepared to act quickly afterwards.
Absolutely. I think the key here is that until that executive order was made official, there was no even consideration of it, even though NJSIAA has put, I believe, an early December beginning to, the next wave of activities or athletics. But now that the governor has weighed in, that makes it now possible. I would expect that within the next week or so, we will begin to see guidance coming out of NJSIAA. So in anticipation, I think that we can begin to gear up while all of the other pieces, begin to fall into place. But to be clear, there are still going to be significant health and safety guidelines that we have to adhere to. And so, like we've seen with everything else, if we want those athletics and activities to continue and to be successful, we have to be smart about following the guidance that we're under for those activities and for everything else that we're doing in the school.
All right, so I guess
go ahead, Naresh. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to have a clarification. No, it's not a question. When the students in the virtual class, I hope they use their Chromebook and not the cell phone, right? I mean, there's a full, interaction, right? And I hope that teachers are properly trained. They have 2 monitors and computers so that they can see the face of every student. And on the other monitor, they can have their material. I do not know whether they use a board also that they can write something there on the board. Because it requires in real time, like the smart board or something, a teacher fully equipped to teach virtual classes. Was there any training? And are all students have the broadband connection so that they can, take the virtual classes?
So I think go ahead, Bob.
So I think the answer to all of your questions there was yes. I mean, there has been a lot of training that was been done. Part of the reason for going with the synchronous model is to allow for when the teacher is working on the board, that the board is actually able to be shared with the students through the technology. They've all been outfitted with their Chromebooks. The district has made sure that students that did not have any access to internet connections, that we were supplying the students with hotspots so that they would have appropriate connections. The building itself has been, over the past several years, we've made significant technological investments to be sure that we had the broadband in place. So I think the answer to all of that is yes. And I would then add to that all of the technology in the world, all the training in the world cannot make up for the complexity of trying to manage a group of students at home and a group of students in your classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bob?
Just
Bob.
that IDE Corp was the third one, Liz,
Oh, that's who it was.
for the DEI.
Thank you.
RFP.
Thanks, Tim.
IDE, not to be confused with DEI, Peter.
That's
Or IDEA?
Exactly.
yes.
right.
IED.
Okay. Susan?
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. So the Personnel Committee met also on October 7th at 5:30. We discussed all the items that are on tonight's agenda, both preview items and action items. First of all, we have a list of teachers and staff for whom we're approving emergency paid sick leave. This is mostly in the situation where they might, somebody might have traveled to a state where they have to return and quarantine, or they might have 2 symptoms on the COVID checklist. And when that happens, they have to be tested for COVID. And if they get a negative result, they have to provide an alternate diagnosis. So all of that takes time, and that's why FFCRA is provided for this emergency paid sick leave. We are happy to have found and hired a new theater arts teacher, Timothy Lynch. He's going to start November 2nd, and he's on the agenda twice tonight. One is for approving him as a new hire, and then second is for improving him as a long-term sub until we receive his paperwork back from the state for his certification. There's also some approvals of staff members to cover for other staff members who are on leave. So some teachers have to cover additional classes. And so we are approving those teachers, and we're also approving that's for chemistry and theater arts. That's on a temporary basis. And then we've also revised the dates of teachers who we had previously approved to cover additional sections of phys ed because the phys ed teacher returned earlier than we had expected. We also discussed the positions in wood arts and in childcare, which Bob mentioned and is very disappointing. And there's a lot of discussion about that, and we're hoping to have better news by our next meeting. We also discussed the new clubs that are not new clubs, but the clubs that are newly being approved tonight for this year. We're happy to have so many new clubs approved. One that's not on the list for tonight's approval is the yearbook club, but I understand the yearbook advisor and maybe somebody from administration is going to be meeting with the yearbook publisher. So we're hoping maybe, I don't know if that meeting has already taken place. It hadn't as of the night that we met, but we hope to have better news about the yearbook club for next meeting also. And we also talked about the winter sports and the approval of the winter coaches. And although at the time we had met, there had still been no determination from NJSIAA. And this was also before the governor's announcement, but we did approve for posting for the head coach for girls basketball. And subsequently there was the announcement by the governor. And so we hope to have the winter sports coaches on the agenda in November for approval. Does anybody else from the committee have anything else to add? Oh, one thing that I wanted to mention was one thing we did do with the co-curricular clubs is they were originally on the agenda for preview, and we moved them to be approved so that they could be approved tonight.
Yeah, that's a little bit out of the ordinary, but we all thought that would be the best bet. Okay, any questions for Susan or Beth? Do you have anything to add? Okay. All right. And then we have operations.
Operations met yesterday, and we went over several things. We went over the additional state aid that's been granted. Tim can provide a little details, but we've got about 40,000 in additional state aid, which is a drop in the bucket to pay some of our COVID supply costs. Tim, you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, no, exactly that. We received an additional $40,000 in aid. We can use it for some of the cost, to defer some of the costs that we had to mitigate the COVID exposure for our students and staff. We've spent much more than that. So, but you know what? Any money we get from the state is a good thing. So,
Right.
you know, that's great. We'll take it.
We then in the operations committee discussed the tentative budget calendar, which I'm not sure exactly where that is available to everybody on the board, whether that was in the,
It's in the drive.
thank
It's
you.
in the drive.
Okay,
Yeah.
and basically, you know, the schedule looks like it does in other years. It provides for us getting state aid information in February, and then presenting the budget in March. Tim said, you know, we'll be pretty lucky if we get the state aid figures on time, just with how everything else is being delayed. But it's, you know, it's the calendar we have to work with now. And so we're just going to keep going on that. The other main topic of conversation has resulted in the two resolutions that are on for approval tonight, D7 and D8, having to do with the bipolar ionization project. What the committee is recommending to the rest of the board is that we approve spending the $28,000 necessary to have our architects work with Tim to do the bid specifications to put the project out to bid. It's anticipated that the cost to do the entire project would be approximately $325,000, and that would encompass the roughly 110 window units where we have window univents, which we would purchase the equipment for each of those and have our own staff install them. The rest of the project would be for all the various rooftop units and units that serve multiple areas. You know, the committee felt also with the recommendation of Chris Bick that, and with the recommendation of our architects, frankly, that would be better off installed by a contractor and not try and do that ourselves. Tim can speak a little bit more to some of the data that's been obtained, but I will tell you that generally, you know, the answer is that bipolar ionization does kill virus particles, and it helps with allergens and other things like that. It has benefits that you know would be helpful even for the flus and other viruses totally beyond COVID. There's not a lot of data that we have yet seen on it actually, you know, working in buildings like schools. We're looking for data on how it's been used in hospitals. We don't have all that quite yet. It's anticipated we would have it before the board would have to make a decision about going forward beyond this $28,000 to actually purchasing all the rest of the units. Greg and Tim, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, most of the articles you'll read, there's a lot of testing in factory type situations, controlled environments, and it at least in the articles that I've read, it's a proven effective in terms of eliminating viruses. They actually specifically do say the COVID virus, they do bring that up. Mold is one on the list. Allergens is one on the list. This particular product years ago, before it became what it is right now, there was some concern about releasing ozones, but this particular product has eliminated that, which is of some concern to some.
So the spec is going to have a specific product. Is that what you mean when you say that? Like the
right. This is bipolar needle ionization, which was in the past. It was just I don't know what the specific name was. I mean, but frankly, I had one in my house. It was years ago, And it
But it
wasn't
was a
as
different
sophisticated
ionization
as.
method that did produce some ozone, different from the current.
Right, that particular unit did, from what I read. This particular unit does not. It doesn't produce those gases. If you look online and take a look at some of the research, the medical, and Greg can probably talk about that much more than I could, but the medical hospitals and whatnot do use this sort of thing, and they do speak very highly of it, which kind of tells you, usually if a hospital, places where sick people are, if they're using it, if they find it effective, then that's a good thing. The major CDCs, ASHRAE, those folks don't really give an opinion on it at all. In fairness, they really just don't opine on it. They just kind of say, yeah,
Right.
it's a tool, but it's not, there's no real proof in an actual setting. But other than that, our architect has talked about putting them in other schools. We weren't the only ones who were doing this. As a matter of fact, I believe Warren K-8 putting it in their middle school. So,
Peter, I would commend you on your great summary of this. I think the things that are important for the board to understand is there's not going to be data on COVID because it's not been around long enough for somebody to actually do a good scientific test about it. However, in laboratory controlled settings, this is effective not just for COVID, but as has been explained, for multiple viruses, molds, other allergens. And so I think the approach that we're going to recommend in adopting this, or at least getting the architect to develop specs for bid, is the fact that this is not specific just for COVID, although we do believe that it would be effective for it, but it's going to have long-term benefits, hopefully once we get beyond COVID anyway, that make it worthwhile making this investment. And as Tim has pointed out, this has been something that has been installed in many very reputable universities, including in New York City and in California. It is also something that the airports have put in, including LaGuardia, including SFO. And so other industries like Google have put it in their complexes. So it is believed to be a generally effective way to reduce risk. And everything that we're doing is about reducing risk. Nothing eliminates risk altogether. It's all about reducing risk and knowing that we have limitations with our HVAC system in filtration as to how much we can reduce risk. This is an added benefit that allows us to reduce risk in a different way without scrapping HVAC altogether and starting with a new system that allows us to create higher filtration rates.
Yeah, and Naresh, let me just make two more points and then we'll turn it over to you.
Sure.
And that is the point that Greg just touched on, the idea that we're not able to address getting down to a MERV 13 or 14 because we'd basically be ripping out our entire HVAC system and redoing it and spending millions of dollars to do it. So that's one way to address air quality. That is something that the CDC, had recommended, that you get to that level if you can. Because we can't, that's a strong reason for those of us on the operations committee are saying we're recommending this to the rest of the board. The last part of this is that Chris Bick also mentioned that one of the things that Tim mentioned, the ability to control and reduce mold, is an important factor here, in that he's going to be dealing with possible mold issues as we get into the colder and wetter months and people are trying to keep windows open. And, not that this is going to be installed in the next 2 or 3 months, but it gives him another tool in controlling the building to have this in dealing with mold. Dr. Chand?
Yeah, so Tim, just for record, at this time, I'm not in favor of this because there's not enough data and it's the taxpayers' money. I mentioned to you yesterday that I pay 75% of my social security just for my house tax. So this is not a free money, and we have to make sure that taxpayers' money is properly used for the benefit of our students. But after the meeting, I've been thinking about it, and I do not know whether these things are custom made or they are standard. If they are just a standard piece of equipment that you buy them, then I do not know what will architect do to develop the specs. He will just take the catalog of the vendor and put that and give you the specs. If it is already standard off the shelf stuff, right, then we are wasting $28,000 to the architect. So I do not know. I would myself, look into that. If you could tell me which stuff you are buying. I talked to my son-in-law, who is a professor at the University of California, San Francisco Hospital. I asked him. He said he never heard about it. He said he doesn't know that their hospital has it or doesn't have it. So my point is that CDC doesn't have any recommendation on it. So I do not want to have something that our school kill a bug with a machine gun. So we have to make sure that we need it. And I'm not sure whether we really need to pay $28,000 to the architect when we can just call a vendor and ask the vendor. Vendor must have done some experiment in their lab. They must have a lab, right? They must have some data. And they can share the data with us. And they may also have their engineer can come and visit our facility and see what do we need. Because same thing architect will do. We can still have the architect. But I think before we do that, we should really invite a vendor and give us the data. Every time when somebody has developed a product, they have tested it. They must have a lot of supporting data to give us. And I do not know whether we have that. So this is the point I'm making. I'm representing the taxpayers. I'm talking on their behalf. I'm their voice. That's the only point I want to make. And I hope that this is recorded here, because we shouldn't really just go ahead and spend hundreds of $1,000s when do not know the utility of that stuff.
Yeah, Naresh, just to be clear, though, just the one point I just want to make clear. There is a significant installation. So you need a public contractor. There's a lot of rules and regulations in terms of health and safety of the building. A lot of public rules in terms of bidders that are allowed to do this sort of project. So, and it has to get Department of Ed approval. So it's not just as simple as taking a product and popping it. It's much more complicated than that, which is why we need, which is why really I would recommend an architect on this sort of project.
That's fine. But my point was that the vendor themselves must have done some study. They must have some data. They could first tell us whether this is useful or not useful. Nobody develops a piece of sophisticated machine and do not test it. I mean, obviously they must have a lot of data, right? They must have something to support us. And if you are right, if his installation requires some sort of skill, and you are going to hire somebody else, that's fine. We can still hire the architect. But my point is it not premature that we commit $28,000 to the architects to give us a report or specs when the specs are already standard? I mean, if the equipment are standard off the shelf, so what will the architect do? He will take the catalog and put the same thing on a piece of paper and give it to you.
Naresh, the installation, there's no standard installation.
Installation is separate. But creating specification is separate.
Wait. Naresh, let Peter finish, please.
Sure.
But and you're right, there are standards for the equipment, but we need an architect to put it all together. And you've got to remember, it's our job to see that the school is well run, not to run it ourselves and take over doing the specs ourselves. But you have to combine the two. And the vendors are always going to tell us their product's great for us, it'll work. But we need the architects to design the system that's going to meet the requirements of the education laws, the State Department of Education, when we get our approval for our facilities plan, and then to make sure it's installed properly. And that is all something that Tim and his business office can't do. Our lawyers can't do. That's why we ask an architect to do it for us.
And the other thing is, I heard through the operations committee that you are trying to get articles and data for us to look at.
Yeah.
Board to look at, right? Correct?
Yeah, correct. I would like to see that whether it is useful. My point is that we should go ahead it if it is necessary. But if it is not necessary, if there is no supporting data, then we should be commit the taxpayers' money. That's my point.
Yeah.
I am for the safety for everybody.
Understood. And I think that that was part of the operation committee's report, is that they're trying to get the articles and the data so that we can look at them.
Exactly. We should ask the vendors and maybe a catalog. I would like to see that because, we are representing our taxpayers and we need to make sure that it's necessary and it will do something.
Okay. Jordana, did you have a comment or question?
You're still muted, Jordana.
Probably a great comment, though.
Riveting comment. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, a couple of items. One is, I'm fully in support of evaluating the data and getting the RFP out and evaluating this. I agree with Naresh. I was taken aback. I don't know what we can do about it, but I do feel like I want to voice it is $28,000 is a lot of money for something we're still evaluating. So I understand the need to hire the architect to do it right. I get it, but I don't know if there's any way we can push back on it. It just seems like a huge amount of money for something that's just for evaluative purposes. And then the other point that I would ask the operations committee or Tim, as we evaluate all the considerations, just understanding how we're funding this, what would need to be cut if we do move forward with this, where's the money coming from, and, other implications, since that's a big chunk of change. And I'm sure, money is not going to be raining on us in addition to other additional costs. So I'd love to understand the full picture of the implications budgetarily.
Jordana, the resolution for the $28,000, just so you understand, it's not just an evaluation, it's preparation of specifications, which is about $22,500, and then $5,500 is construction administration. Now, the architect wouldn't bill us for construction administration if we didn't do the project, but the $22,000 for design of specs, they would. I mean, it's once you go down the road of approving that, we're committed for them to do the project. Now, we would own the specs forever. So whenever you wanted to do it or not, there are specs and we can use them for a bid.
So do you feel that we cannot do a proper bid without those specifications?
I think you absolutely need the architect to do the specifications. And on this particular project, it's too complex for us to just do it on our own.
Yeah, no, and I'm just more thinking the order in which we do it, right? Once we decide, we vote that this is the right thing to do, and we've considered all the data and the costs and where the budget is coming from, and we all agree, yes, do we then spend the money and do the specifications as opposed to spend it now when, we haven't fully, exploring it is the right thing to do by all means, but we haven't fully all agreed that this is something that we want to do. So is this the right time to spend this money?
Well, yeah. So when we talked at the operations committee, so what we were presenting, or really what I presented to them, was there's two projects on the books that we've kind of deferred right now anyway. One is there's a high jump on the track, which needs to be replaced. That was in our original budget, but we kind of moved away from that for now. And we deferred a few things in the budget, mainly because of all the things that are going on and the uncertainty of the way things are right now. So that was one project. That was about $150,000. And then another one, which was close to that, not a little bit less than that, maybe about $75,000 to $85,000, was weight room equipment in the north building. And since we're not going to be using weights this year at all, we kind of deferred that one. So those two projects is what I described to the board, to the operations committee, is those were the two that I would defer if you wanted to do this project and put it in its place. it gets you close to being there. So, and the other parts I can just kind of, dig up from the rest of the budget. But those two projects I would defer and then do this one if we were going to move forward with this project.
So Jordan, are you asking about efficacy of the product first? Have that discussion before you go out to bid to figure out how much money it is? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I mean, my understanding of going out to bid is to understand the full, the full cost and what it would take and timing and, right? I mean, because we kind of have, my understanding, right, kind of think in the air, there's enough interest, and it is certainly, important enough to get, sharpen the pencil, understand fully, all the details, as well as gather. We talked about that last time, as well as gather as much data, understanding that there is not, lots of data available, but whatever there is, so that we as a board can weigh everything before we proceed. So I thought, my understanding was that this is what we're agreeing to do right now before we're starting to spend significant money. Like I would expect that we would start spending significant money once we all agree that this is indeed a way to go. Otherwise, if we, for some reason, something comes up and we say, it's not a good spending, then we've just spent $22,000 at least. I'm sure we can find a good use for it. So I'm just questioning the timing of them spending.
The committee have any response on that, other than basically?
Well, I think what we,
information that you already have leads you to believe that you do think if it's going to be effective?
I think what we're addressing, as I tried to state before, is that, we've got guidance from public health officials in the CDC that air quality and filtration is something that you want to try and achieve. Because we can't achieve this is a technology that's much cheaper but kills the virus, and that's why we're recommending to the board that we go forward with this. We're saying to you that we don't have to make the decision today on the entire thing, but we believe, and the committee, it's worth going in this direction, doing this, spending the $22,500 or the $28,000 at this point. And, that still gives us the board an opportunity, if you want to, hold off on this later, to have that decision made later. But, I think that, except for Dr. Chan, the rest of the operations committee feels that this is a direction that we can go to make our buildings safer for the students and the staff.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Freddie?
I got a quick comment and then into a question. So I just would like to echo the comments made by Mr. Bond, in the same agreement with her. My question is that obviously as we're approaching the winter months, and if we are going to be expanding one day to say, full sessions, planning for that ahead of time, and we have indoor dining or students are eating indoors, and soon sports will be happening indoors. Is there anything that, data or research could point to how the bipolarization can help mitigate anything, since we'll be having students exercising indoors and eating indoors? Anything on that?
Well, the one thing about bipolar ionization, Freddie, is that the idea of it is it will kill aerosolized virus particles. The CDC, after first coming out and saying that's a problem, pulled it back for 3 weeks, and then last week came out and said there is some transmission. We don't know how much, but there is some transmission by aerosolized particles. That is what we're trying to attack with putting in this technology in the school.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the fees the architect would charge as sort of a insurance policy, that we know that whatever we're going to do is done in accordance with all the rules and regulations and codes. And it gives us backup in case someone comes after us and says, why did you do this? This is not proper. we have the architect to go to bat for us and say, this is done properly. This is done according to the proper specs.
Absolutely. And I don't disagree with that. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm more questioning the timing, right? Again, we agreed that we are going to discuss this after we have, you know, as many of the facts. I mean, I'm going to claim ignorance. I don't know anything about that. I'm not saying it's a no, but I'm not saying it's a yes right now. And I feel like this resolution assumes that we're moving forward. And that's not what we agreed to last time we talked about it. We said we're going to look at the facts, educate ourselves. And do we have any issues getting an RFP out there? Of course, you know, why not? Let's have all the information when we weigh everything together. But I'm kind of hearing now that we're like, well, let's spend it because certain folks in the operations committee feel that that's the right thing to do. Again, you might be more educated than I am. I have no problem saying I am an idiot when it comes to this, but I do want to get educated. So when I do vote on it, at least it comes with some knowledge and I feel good about it. So that's all I'm saying. I had assumed that we're going to have more kind of robust conversation with facts.
Who's trying to connect, Liz?
There are people who only have their initials, and so I'm just, I have to admit them in order to ask them to state their name. So that's what I'm.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Jordana, the one thing I would say is, you know, I think Tim has done a survey and gotten a lot more information than we had when we discussed this before. He's gotten the information about this, as you know, as he stated before, about it's effective to kill the virus. I guess the one point that we at the operations committee, you know, were concerned is that, you know, there's not a lot of data on this working in school facilities. While it's been used in hospitals for a long time, there's not a lot of data. Because it's new but that's the data point that we're missing. I don't know that we're going to get the data point on that at any time this year. And that's, I think, the reason that some of us on the operations committee feel that we've gotten the information and, you know, we're never, as Greg had made the point earlier, you know, with COVID, we're not going to get all the data points. We've made other decisions in the past with, you know, the best data that we can and the best information we can. That's why Tim has been studying this for the last month. And that's why the operations committee is ready to say, you know, we're recommending this to the rest of the board.
I'm not sure if you guys both see that Mr. Morrison and Dr. Shabilsky do have their hands up.
Sorry, I didn't.
That's what, yep, no problem. So I believe Mr. Morrison's has been up for a little while longer than Dr. Shabilsky.
Yep.
So just a couple things. First, if you recall, when we had the presentation, I believe it was in late August, where we were talking about filtration for the school, and they walked through what were the things that, you know, what are the options that were in front of us? What could we do? You know, what would we need to do to the system to be able to accommodate the MERV 13 or higher filters, and that it didn't make any sense because it would actually make the system less effective by trying to retrofit it. And so there was no elegant solution in trying to fix the system that way, but they brought forward the idea of how bipolar ionization has been used effectively in environments where you can't, you know, adjust the filtration system by just upgrading your filters. So the whole idea was, you know, again, as Greg reiterated, this is about mitigating risk. You know, what steps can we take to lower risk? And look, the researchers have known that this has been aerosolized for 6 months. The CDC just coming around to this, you know, is whatever it is, but this is not new news that this is aerosolized. So the whole idea of being able to put in place something that can address aerosolized particles that, in addition to being related to COVID, can actually support other health issues and air quality issues for our students. When you look at making an investment of this amount of money that impacts every student, every faculty member, every staff member, every administrator, every parent that walks into our building, I think the return on investment is great. And I think investing in the health and safety of our students is what we were elected to do. So that's certainly why I'm in full support of the Operations Committee recommendation. My only question is, Tim, if we move forward on the architect and then be able to go out to bid, what's the timeline in doing this? Because, it's been 6 weeks since we started this conversation, and the sooner we have this in place, the better it is, in my view.
So, yeah, so I talked to the manufacturer. The GPS is the manufacturer. So from what they're saying, it's pretty readily available. Now, the bid process does take at least a month, and in some cases, a month and a half, maybe 2. So that's kind of where we're talking now. I don't know what installation is after that. So yeah, it could take about 3-4 months. It's possible. Because installation, again, if you're going up on the roof to do rooftop units, it's not simple work. Now, the univents, the ones in the classrooms, that's our guys doing it. And they can knock those out. And I've seen them. Our guys can do that within a week or 2. Not knowing exactly what it is, but just looking at the product and looking how they install those from what they showed us, those can be done rather quickly. It's the other ones, I think it's a little more complicated. So there are BCUs, there's these, the rooftops, which are tricky.
Mr. Chan, Greg was next.
Okay.
Before you. Sorry.
So everyone's seeking facts. So facts are: 1, air quality matters. I don't think anybody can dispute that. 2, we can't improve upon the filtration system that we have already without a multi-million-dollar investment in scrapping and replacing, which I think is unrealistic. 3, we are now going to be going into colder months where our opportunities of bringing in fresh air are going to be reduced. And at the same time, we just discussed and are excited about being able to resume indoor sporting activities, which will be increasing risks within our institution. So the questions are, what can we do that is plausible, that can make a difference in reducing that risk? So bipolar ionization has been shown to be effective for things that are very similar to COVID. So SARS, it has been shown to be effective for it, and it has been used in that circumstance. MERS, it has been effective for. Both of those are also coronaviruses, albeit different, albeit with a different spread rate and death rate, but nonetheless, a similar biological entity that there is history of effectiveness for this. Multiple hospitals have been using this for decades as a way to improve air quality within the hospital. Those would include Boston Children's Hospital. I can go through a list of different hospitals if people are interested. Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, etc. So we're not going to get data on coronavirus COVID-19 specifically. That's just not going to happen to help educate us. Second, the more we delay, we're essentially putting off being able to make a change while our risk is increasing, because as we close windows, as it gets colder, there's nothing else that we can do that we have been able to determine other than this. And I think, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, we explored what options are available to us. This seemed to be the only reasonable option. There is lab data that says that this is effective for COVID-19, but we're not going to get practical, real school information because it just doesn't exist. So putting all of that together, I agree with Bob, I agree with Peter. This is a prudent investment, and there is a time factor that needs to be accounted for in the decisions that we make.
Yeah, and just to further that point, what Greg said, the lab data was 99% on some of these issues. So in other words, at so much time, it was shown in these lab tests to kill 99.4% of these various viruses and whatnot within an hour or two, something like that. It was very specific facts. It was not, I mean, these were specific lab tests now.
So not that I don't like talking about filtration.
Yeah.
But I don't. So I'm done. But so if any board members wants to have specific questions concerning the data that Tim is talking about, or Greg, I'm going to ask you to go directly to them, and hopefully they can maybe give you more specifics as to the actual efficacy. Tonight on the agenda is just the issue of a yay or nay on the RFP. I mean, yeah, for the architect.
Specifications.
Yeah, specifications. Sorry, specifications.
Well, and to submit a project to the Department of Ed.
Right, correct.
Because we would need their approval.
Right, and that's all about timing. So that is an issue.
Correct.
So even if efficacy down the road, somehow we don't have all the votes, we got to move on it to even get there now, to have this done by any stretch of time within January, February. So, so Mr. Chan.
Yeah, I have point to make here.
I mean, I think we've kind of.
Right, no, but I think I'm making something new. A new point. Point I'm making is that the window unit, they must be sitting there off the shelf. We can just order them, and our people are going to install it.
No,
and
so Mr. Chan, we've had this conversation a few different times, and I think Tim has answered this a few times.
No, let me complete.
Mr. Chan, we can't just order things. We've already had.
Why no? If it's a window unit, it's a standard unit. There is no spec to be generated. So we could take a middle path. We order them, and our people are going to install it. We will reduce the cost by maybe more than 50% if we go through that, and we will avoid the delay, because you can order tomorrow and they will come, and by the end of the month you can have it installed.
Under the local public contract laws, I think Tim has already indicated that 50 different ways. So we're going to move on now. Operations Committee's report is over, and we're going to go into the first opportunity for public comment.
And what we'll do, because there's a 30-second delay between our Zoom and the YouTube stream, we'll just give folks some time in case they want to sign on for public comment.
Okay.
So we'll give them about 30 to 60 seconds.
Yep. At which the first public comment period is limited to agenda items for this meeting only. And then the second public comment period is open to any topic. All comments are limited to 5 minutes. Please put your name on your screen through the Zoom application so that Ms. Jewett can recognize you.
And also mention what town you're from, please.
Thank you, Susan.
So right now I have one person in the waiting room. They changed it back to their initials. So I'm going to admit them, but we need to ask them obviously to state their name. And just so everyone understands, we're not being difficult. It's for security reasons with Zoom that we're asking that you state your name, so that we can just maintain the security and integrity of the meeting. So just for your knowledge. So I just added you to the meeting. You're listed as MS, so please make sure you state your full name and the town in which you reside.
They look like they're on mute.
They can unmute themselves. Unless they just recently signed back in, so I thought they might be there.
And this is the only person you have in the waiting room right now?
Yes, correct.
Because we bored everybody with filtration. Sorry.
Warm down.
All right, so I don't think that's working. this person, so.
They can hear us. I mean, they can hear us via Zoom because they are in the Zoom meeting, so they're not even on the delay. So what I will do is I'm going to remove you, and you will have a second opportunity for public comment if you would like to rejoin us to make a public comment at that point.
And again, like any other time, if you have a comment that you want to submit through the email channels, we can deal with that as well. All right, so now we're going to move on to board discussion only of future action items. So those are the action items under Roman numeral 8. So we know about curriculum. We're going to look at that beforehand. Personnel, we discussed in exec. So what about under D? Anybody have any questions about what's going to happen next meeting under D?
Madam President, I did move 2 of the items from future to voting.
And what
That
did
was
you do? Okay,
2 grant awards we received that our Italian teachers
okay,
received. After thinking about it, I don't know why I had them in future. There's no reason to delay receiving
Right.
money
Yep,
for them
yep,
to
yep.
spend. So it was,
okay. All right, so I'm hearing no discussion on these action items.
Rita, sorry,
Yeah.
Madam President,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure the item 5, D5, that's not the workshop, is it?
For travel, the travel reimbursement, you mean?
Right.
I
think
think that's
thought
teachers, I think.
okay, the one that's
Seminars and workshops for 2021 school
Oh.
year as per the attached.
I think you guys are in action items.
You're in
I
an
thought
action.
we were in action items, but I don't, this says per the attached. And I
That's
don't
the
think there's
travel. I
another
think
attached.
That's if we have one for the next meeting.
Okay.
That's
Oh,
I
you're
just
looking-
wanted to make sure because we have to register for workshop like tomorrow.
Oh, no, that is the one, number 5 in the preview. That's just a placeholder for the next meeting.
Right.
You are on
Okay.
as an action item.
Okay.
You are
Right.
actually, Dina was very
D2.
diligent about that.
I
Making-
thought so. I
Yes.
didn't notice that
D2.
that there was something. Okay, got
Thank
it.
you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Which you should abstain to, Susan, when you.
I know. Yes, got it.
Okay, anybody else? Discussion on future action items? Okay, moving on then, we will move to action items. Can I have some motions?
Madam President, I'd like to move the adoption of resolutions A1 through A3.
Second.
Any questions or comments, A1 through A3? Hearing none, Mr. Stiles, roll call.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Mr. Fallon,
Yes.
Mr. Hayek,
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Ms. Potter,
Yes.
Mrs. Ober,
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky,
Yes.
Ms. Ravon,
Yes.
and Ms. Barone.
Yes.
Motion's carry.
Madam President, I'd like to move the adoption of resolutions A4 through A9.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, A4 through A9? Hearing none, roll call, please, Mr. Stiles.
Dr. Chan,
Yes.
Mr. Fallon,
Yes.
Mr. Hayek,
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Mrs. Ober,
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky,
Yes.
Ms. Ravon,
Yes.
and Ms. Barone.
Yes.
Motion's carry.
Madam President, I'd like to move the adoption of resolutions C1 through C14.
Second.
Any questions or comments on C1 through C14?
I have a question on C3.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this Terry McConnell guy has been vetted or not, so I'm just kind of,
Yeah.
No.
Can we exclude him?
that's it.
Okay.
You can approve the rest of that resolution and except for him, Tim can put that in the minutes.
Yes.
Anybody else? Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Chand,
Yes.
Mr. Fallon,
Yes,
Mr. Hayek,
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Morrison,
Yes.
Mrs. Ober,
Yes.
Ms. Potter,
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky,
Yes.
Ms. Raban,
Yes.
and Ms. Barone.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Madam President, I'd like to move the adoption of resolutions D1 through D8, and I'll just remind my fellow board members that D7 and D8 are the approval of the money for the architect to do the bid specs, and D8 is for the submission to the State Department of Education, excuse me, of the facilities plan to include the bipolar ionization.
Second.
Any questions or comments on D1 through D8?
Madam President, not a question, actually a question and then a comment. Tim, could you explain D6 just a little more fully? Where are these grants coming from?
So the grants, talking to Mrs. Grunther, the grants came from, let's see, did you say, I know they're from Italy.
The Italian American Committee on Education, isn't that where they're from? That's the way it
Yeah,
reads.
but they're actually from Italy.
Oh,
What she was
interesting.
telling me. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
she's been talking to that group for the past week. In fact, she talked to me a couple of days ago. She goes, "What's the time frame?" I says, I have to look on the agenda, but I was originally going to have it voted on the 27th. I says I should probably move them up. She goes, "Yeah, they're getting a little anxious." But yeah, it's actually the Italian. She describes it as the Italian government.
yeah.
So
And it's dollars, not liras.
no, it is dollars. Yes,
Well, they use the euro anyway.
not euros.
So
it's dollars.
Are we going to have to report to Mike Pompeo that we're getting this money?
That's a good question. Not enough.
So I wanted to extend our thanks to the
Yes.
Italian American Committee on Education, as well as Ms. Grunther and Ms. Trong for their diligence in acquiring those funds to support their programs. Bravo to them, and a tad tip of thanks to the donor.
Yes, and I agree, Bob. Thank you for extending those thanks to Patty and the other for their work on this.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please, Mr. Stice.
Okay, Dr. Chand.
What are the items we are voting for?
This is
D1
through
through
D8.
D8.
So if you want to vote no on D7 and 8, you can.
Yeah, so D7, D8, I'm abstain. I have no either yes or no. I don't have information to say yes or no at this time.
And is that yes on D1 through D6, Naresh?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Fallon.
Yes.
Mr. Hayek.
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger.
Yes.
Mr. Morrison.
Abstain on D2, yes to everything else.
Okay, Ms. Potter.
Yes.
Mrs. Ober.
Abstain on D2 and yes to everything else.
Dr. Shabilsky.
Yes.
Ms. Raban.
Yes, and it's yes to D1 and D8, and the understanding that we're exploring, and I'll be open-minded and look forward to more conversations.
Okay. And Ms. Barone.
Yes.
Okay, motion's carry.
Madam President, I'd like to move the adoption of resolutions D9 and D10.
Second.
Any questions or comments on D9 and D10 or D10? Yeah, okay, roll call, please.
Okay, Dr. Chand.
Yes.
Mr. Fallon.
Yes.
Mr. Hayek.
Yes.
Mr. Hunsinger.
Yes.
Mr. Morrison.
Yes.
Mrs. Ober.
Yes.
Dr. Shabilsky.
Yes.
Ms. Raban.
Yes.
And Ms. Barone.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
We are now at the point of our meeting for the second opportunity for public comment. And is there anybody in the waiting room? You're muted.
So not yet, so we'll wait about 30 to 60 seconds. And just so everyone's aware, we have about 40 people who have been watching live, and we have about 100 people who have been using the DVR-like feature of YouTube, where if they want to take a snack break and pause us, they can do that.
So you can see how many people are on YouTube to know how many people we could potentially get questions from.
Yes.
Okay,
So
well, that's good to know.
Well, I can't, but I can text our IT folks who let me know how many people are on. So just so
They're not
I wanted to
thinking
verify.
that anything is wrong with our Zoom waiting room or anything, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, but if you put yourself in the waiting room and walk away from whatever device you put yourself in the waiting room
Yes.
on.
And there have been people popping in and out. I mean, I've been watching it the whole time. So they're certainly able to access it, but I just so everyone's reassured that there are people watching the meeting. So they're hearing us, talk about public comment and they're aware.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm less concerned that they're watching than that they might be trying to comment and we're not hearing them.
Yeah. No, and I'm watching the
Throwing stuff at the TV.
and I also am checking because folks in the past too have emailed me, that they're having trouble with Zoom, and I haven't gotten anything of that either. So I have all my devices that I'm checking out to make sure we're not missing anyone.
Okay. All right. And then we'll debrief on this technology thing next time.
Mhm.
Does this one work? Does this work?
Exactly.
Popcorn worthy show.
I know. I like that there's a DVR like feature to it. So they can pause us, they can fast forward us, they can rewind us if there was a really scintillating part of the meeting.
Annihilation.
So we still do not have anyone in the waiting room trying to enter the Zoom meeting to make a comment.
Okay. All right. Give it another 30 seconds or so. We do have to go back and exec because we didn't finish technically, right?
Yeah, I think we have one item left.
All right. Do we want to do that before or after other business? Anybody care? All right. We'll go other business, then we'll go into exec.
So, Madam President, I just have one item. I just want to, again,
I'm going to close
congratulate.
the second opportunity for public comment. I guess at this point, nothing, Liz?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Before Peter yells at me.
I just want to commend, again, the faculty and staff and all of our coaches and everyone else and parents that have been working hard to create some sense of normalcy to the best that they can. It was, I've heard about all the different senior nights that have been taking place, and, the marching band did their senior night and performed their show, even though there was nobody around, but they were still able to celebrate with their parents. And the same thing with all of our sports having their senior nights, although it's kind of odd having the first athletic event be senior night. But given that that's what we needed to do to accommodate them, I think that it's great. And I just, I think every time we see a glimpse of something that we're used to seeing in the scholastic environment gives us a little more hope of, what we're building back towards. So I thank everyone for working so hard and pushing through to create those opportunities for this class of seniors. So that they don't miss, so that we can mitigate the amount of things that they miss as much as possible.
Yeah, and as Bob mentioned before, nice to see that our football team, after their scare and one positive test, got onto the field last night, and our other sports teams, again, the coaches and the kids are doing wonderful. I think a lot of us thought we wouldn't get this far without having to close the school by now. So kudos to everybody, and thanks to the staff and the students and the administration.
I actually really enjoyed back to school night, not having to run from class to class. That was wonderful. And I sat down with my son and we both watched the videos. Really appreciate all the teachers putting those videos together. I'm sure they appreciated not saying the same thing like 10 times as well, I hope. But that was very well done.
I thought back to school night was exceptionally well done. And I actually appreciated for the first time being able to attend my son's second semester classes, which you can't do when you attend in person. So that was an added bonus for me. And I thought the teachers all put a great amount of effort into their presentations. And I thought it was very well done. I also wanted to really commend the guidance department for the financial aid presentation. I don't, I'm a parent of a senior, so I haven't attended this before at Watchung Hills, but the presenter was really phenomenal. I learned so much, and I have 2 children who had gone to private schools. I had never seen a presentation that thorough and really, really exceptional. So I thought that was so well done. I also wanted to put a plug in, and it's funny, I'm just getting a news feed that Supreme Court allows Trump administration to end census count. And I wanted to put a plug in to make sure everybody does submit their census data. So I don't know if it's too late to do that, but I heard a statistic. I live in Morris County, and I heard a statistic that Morris County was only 72% of our data has been collected. And certainly nothing good comes from our numbers being underrepresented. So I wanted to put a plug in for that, but there's this new news. So I'm disturbed about that. And finally, I just wanted to mention to everybody to please vote for those, and good luck to Freddie for his upcoming election.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other business? Anybody else? I just
Madam
want to get.
President, motion to go
Oh,
back
wait,
into,
I have one thing to say.
sorry.
So we're doing the strategic plan goal setting on November 10th. So part and parcel with that is we kind of put on the burner, and the question is when, just think about when should the board's goals be discussed through some sort of retreat? Because we kind of said that we kind of wanted to get strategic plan going, but we still have, our board goals are from like 2018 or something. So we need to sort of
Further back.
Okay. We need to get on that. And I know there's a lot going on, but I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, now Peter, go ahead.
Motion to go back into executive session to discuss
I think the PSA negotiation and the CSA evaluation.
negotiations and evaluation. The matters will be disclosed when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. When we return, we will not be taking any action.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.